I think this last week in Canadian politics has proven why we need to get rid of the toxic trend of quoting experts in mainstream news stories. It's absolutely ridiculous that we have supposedly neutral journalists who are also taxpayer paid, by the way, because that doesn't hurt a little bit. But that we have all these supposedly neutral journalists quoting experts in their stories, pretending that what they're doing is just neutral reporting, while laundering an obvious liberal perspective through someone who's supposedly so wise that they rise above having any particular political bias. We saw this acutely this last week with the stupid story that came out from the Canadian press that multiple legacy outlets ran that claimed that Pierre Poilievre of the Conservative Party were embracing conspiracy theorist language simply because they released I think it was a press release, a donation email, basically calling out the ideology of the WF and then condemning the liberals for buying into a lot of what the WF thinks. That's obviously not a conspiracy theory, but the Canadian press story was able to quote two experts in political science and something else, supposedly claiming that now the Conservative Party is objectively embracing conspiracy language. That is effectively what experts are meant to do. They launder a particular perspective into the news media, and their expert status basically makes that perspective be a neutral perspective moving forward. That it's not just because it's not their liberal perspective as someone who has some expertise in a particular field. It is now just the expert opinion. This is what leads us to having a journalist or a supposed journalist like Teresa Wright, who works at the National Observer, I believe, or no, National Newswatch. I don't want to smear the National Observer, but National Newswatch, showing up to a press conference with Pierre Poilievre and PEI and using that previous like Canada press story, claiming that the Conservatives were embracing conspiracy language, to then feel justified asking Pierre Poilievre if he was dog whistling to the far right. This was completely ridiculous and unfounded. But you can see from the few days prior to her asking that question, simply by citing some experts in a supposedly neutral story, it is now considered a widespread opinion that Pierre Poilievre might be trying to dog whistle and gain the support of the far right and like neo-Nazis and whatnot. It's completely ridiculous, but this is why I think we need to get rid of the whole idea of experts. I don't quote someone who I know is conservative in a particular field and then just claim that they are the be-all end-all expert. And it's obvious just from my coverage that I come from a conservative perspective. But the CBC can pretend that it's being neutral while obviously turning every single article into a commentary article by simply quoting someone who's just assumed to just be giving the straight up facts on a subject matter just because they happen to be in a particular field of study or from a particular sort of background of work. That's obviously not how it works. Everyone knows if they work in a particular field, there's not just the perspective on how things work, other than if you're in math. Although that's increasingly not true these days with a lot of left-wing mathematicians claiming that 2 plus 2 can equal 5. But anyways, like that, in most fields of study, there are always going to be different perspectives. But the news media is sort of doing this nonsense where there is just such a thing as this higher tiered person because they have a PhD or a master's degree, that when they say something, there's just some extra weight behind it. While they might have some experience, it doesn't mean that their experience isn't being tainted through bias, that they're obviously not going to make certain conclusions based on just their personalities or their attitudes about specific things. So with the whole story about Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives being bad for opposing the WF's views, obviously the people who are commenting on that just associate people who talk a lot about the WF with conspiracy theorists. And are there conspiracy theorists who obsess about the WF? Yeah, sure there are. There's people who think that Klaus Schwab is literally the ruler of the world and that he's an evil mastermind. And then there's the vast majority of us who don't like the WF simply because we don't like the ideology they push and the politicians who end up embracing that ideology. That's not conspiratorial, but the person that they were citing, the expert, associates anyone bring up the WF with being sort of this evil, terrible right-wing conspiracy theorist. So that was just considered now a neutral perspective. So now anyone who talks about the WF is considered to be whatever that one expert had a bias towards. And this is actually infecting all sorts of other news coverage. This is obviously what happens whenever the issue of climate change is brought up, and the experts are always the type of people who support big government action. It's never a person who just knows a lot about the subject and will inform you about sort of the sort of scientific perspective on the matter in terms of just well, here's like the general trends of heating in the world, and here's what technically you can do if you cut this much CO2 in the air. But I'm not going to give any like of my opinions. Every single time someone on the climate change issue is cited, it's always someone immediately saying, well, you need to phase out oil and gas, and you need to subsidize EVs and different green energy projects. That's always the way it is. It was always the way it was in COVID-19. You never brought up someone who was maybe supporting the way Sweden was dealing with COVID-19 and making sure not to lock down much at all. It was always someone who was very pro lockdown, and this happens repeatedly on other issues too. And I think now that it has definitely infected just basic political commentary in Canada, or basic political coverage, to the fact that it doesn't matter what a conservative says, you can find an expert willing to say that somehow they're connected to some evil, bigoted organization, the way that the Anti-Hate Network has clearly done over the last couple of years. Is that now this whole expert industry is completely worthless, and that we need to get rid of it. Well, but that's just my little kind of mini rant on the whole idea of experts and why I think it's just fundamentally flawed. If you want to support my legal effort against a Chinese billionaire who's trying to sue me and TNT for defamation, you can donate at the Give Send Go link below. I'm winning that case currently because my case is actually good and his sucks. And so if you want to help me out that way, that's great. And also sign up for the National Telegraph's emails at the link below as well if you want to be able to get our emails for our written and video content, because obviously because of Bill C-18, you can't see everything that we put out, specifically because Facebook was our main traffic area for written content, and now all we have is Twitter. So if you want to be able to get our stuff delivered straight to you, make sure to go sign up at that email link below. And other than that, have a great day.